What's going on, everybody? My name's Alonso. I'm here with Jose and Danny. And for those of you that don't know these two, you are seeing some of California's best big line highliners. In just 2 short years, these guys have managed to get PRs of over 500 meters. And we're here to tell you today how you can send big lines a lot more consistently. So I'm actually gonna throw this over on them, and then I'll tell you my thoughts in the end. And we're gonna let Jose start first. So Jose,
all right.
You've been doing this for about 2 years now, give or take, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
And when you started, I remember you were already kind of okay walking because you had been practicing in the park, but it took you a while before you sent your first big line, and then you started to send 280 meters really, really consistently.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for people that are maybe starting to send lines around the 50, 60 meter range, that have tried a big line or two, but can't seem to make it click for those big lines?
I think a lot of it comes down to consistency. I mean, when we were rigging, it was like, let's rig a 260, then it went to 300, then the 500. So just having access to big lines will help, but to break it down even further, it comes down to endurance. So I think a lot of it has to do with being fit. You don't have to be like the most fit person in the world, but cardiovascular endurance is definitely a plus. And I look at this guy, he bikes and he crushes, so I think that actually really helps, is being able to have like a very strong cardiovascular system.
Okay.
And
so real quick, let's go back to that. You said having access and how we kept ramping up on those lines. I remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember we would ramp up, and you never sent one of those lines.
I never did.
It was a random weekend, I feel like months, maybe even year later, after walking so many big lines, that something just all of a sudden clicked for you.
Yeah.
What was that click? Do you remember?
I do. It was we rigged parallel lines.
Yeah, it was the 260 and the 280.
And I got on the 280. I got on the 280.
Okay.
So that was my first big send. I think before that I sent like 46 meters. So it was quite a jump.
That's like a 300-400% increase.
I know, it was pretty wild. I was actually surprised, but all I did was slowed it down. And my mindset was like, if I can send a 46 meter line or a park line, I can send another line. It's the same logic. It's just mentally not freaking out. And that's something I did a lot, was like, oh man, I focused so much on sending instead of just going and counting my steps, because before I used to be like, I want to send this line, and then I never sent a line.
Okay.
And it wasn't until you gave me the advice of counting your steps to just really focus and not overthinking it.
So were you, because I have a big problem of, I always think of the end goal, right?
Same.
So whenever I start walking a big line, I'm immediately in my head of like, I got to go all the way over there. So did counting your steps help you just kind of exit that distraction of wanting to get to the other side and just help you be more present with every step?
It did. And I did change my style of music. I used to play like really fast music and try to rush, because we used to race each other, and I always wanted to be the second fastest in the group.
I do remember that.
And so once I changed my mindset of, because I did want to be the second best in our group. That was my mindset, because I was like, oh, I want to catch up to Alonso. I want to beat Danny because Danny's on my tail. And then once I was like, you know what? I'm just doing it for fun. It actually changed. So not being as competitive with other people and just being more focused on like beating my best time or PR.
Okay, cool.
So,
and then now the last thing. So now we've gone over kind of your headspace and like your story. Now, if you could talk to somebody who's going to maybe watch this video, who's actually wanting to train, how would you guide them? What would you tell them to do in terms of training that they can actually objectively do, say tomorrow even, in order to get better on big lines? Big high lines, of course, not long lines.
I mean, that's a tricky one.
I know you said access.
If you have access to getting on lines, the best thing is just being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So the more lines you can get on, the better you're going to be. And slowing it down is probably my biggest tip, and just mentally preparing for the struggle. Because you're going to struggle. I still struggle, but for me, it really helped to just slow everything down.
So slow down.
Slow down, have access, you know, just...
and take it one step at a time.
Yep, one step at a time.
Apparently try counting your steps, because
it works.
Slow it down. Okay, cool, yeah. So now we're gonna hop on to Danny boy over here. Now Danny's got a really funny story. And
Is it funny?
Tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but I hadn't seen Danny send a single line. Danny started with us back during COVID times, and this guy was flopping all over the place. You know, he learned to stand but couldn't take a single step, kind of thing.
For like months.
For months, and I even remember him coming up to me and telling me that it was just not clicking for him, and he wasn't sure if this sport was for him. Fast forward, I'm going to rewind, but let's fast forward to a year and a half later. It's now November 2021. Danny is on the biggest line in the USA, 1.35 kilometers. And he falls a mere like 15 meters from the anchor, maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
15 meters from the anchor. Walked 1.335 kilometers and fell 15 meters from the anchor. Insane progress in just a year and a half, when a year and a half ago he couldn't even take a step on any line. So now back to the funny story. We're on a 500 meter line. Danny's at this point crossing big lines, but he's taking like multiple falls along these big lines that he's crossing, just like Jose was at the time. And then Danny comes back on the line, and I remember this very vividly. We were all just hanging out on the cliff.
It was like second session of the day.
Yeah, second session of the day. We're just hanging out. Danny comes back. We're like, hey, Danny, welcome back. And Danny goes, guys, I just fucking sent this line. And we were all like, whoa, wait, seriously? Like, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't believe it. I thought you were messing with us when you said that. And he upped his PR from
like 70.
From 70 meters all the way to 500 meters.
Yeah.
So Danny, I'm gonna give you the mic. Mm-hmm. Tell everyone, how would you guide people into, you know, into breaking that zone and sending big high lines? Because from 70 to 500,
yeah,
it's a massive jump.
Massive. I don't know if anyone. And by the way, if anyone else out there has a more massive leap than from 70 to 500, let us know, because I don't know anybody here that does, unless it's like a world record line or something, but that doesn't count.
Yeah, just the U.S. record line, that counts. No, but yeah, it was, yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me was like obviously getting on a lot of big lines, like having the opportunity made a big difference, but like not thinking about sending the line, because like a lot of times, you know, you're walking and you've walked, like you've crossed maybe half the line and you haven't fallen, and it's like you start to think, like you get that send anxiety, like you don't want to start thinking it, but it's like, oh, I might send this, like, oh man, like what are my friends gonna say when I send this line? And like you just like get all up in your head. And I think one of the best things is just like it's like trying to meditate and just like push that away and don't think about it, and you're just like you were saying, you like focus on the end goal. Like I don't even think about like getting to the other side. I just think about taking steps. Like I'm focusing on like what I'm doing right here, and I'm just like trying to take steps and like get across is like it's in the back of my head, but I'm not thinking about it.
Okay.
So
now how do you actually do that? Because I'm going to tell you, me personally, it's really, really hard for me to enter that mind space, especially if it's a new PR for me. It's really, really hard for me to not let the send anxiety creep in and think about that end goal. But you seem to be really, really good at just focusing on the next step. Is there something you do specifically that you could do that, or are you just kind of like gifted in that mindset manner that you can just do it?
I mean, I'm only in my own head, so it's hard to compare to like other people. But
there's nothing like you tell yourself repeatedly to help you do that, or something objective, you know? No,
I don't really I don't talk to myself. I just like listen to music, even though I've like recently been practicing not listening to music. But yeah, I feel like music really helps. It just like gives me something to like listen to and kind of zone out to, like especially music I know really well, so I can like have it in just like kind of blocking everything else out, but also not focusing on it. Sure. So okay. Yeah. All right. No, that's great. So it's like a whole just mindset of being present for you. Yeah. Now, same question I asked Jose. If you could give people an objective thing that they could do to progress in their big line journey, what would that thing be? Yeah, I think like you know, definitely one of the biggest things is not thinking about it. Like when I sent that 500, like I had been crossing it all week, but you know, it wasn't, I was just like having fun. Like I wasn't thinking about like, oh, I'm trying to send. And so like on like that last sesh when I had walked out, I fell, I don't know, a few hundred meters out. And then like I stood, like, you know, I got up and like walked to the other end and just turned around and walked all the way back. And it just like happened. So,
that's really cool.
Yeah, I wasn't like thinking like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and then like getting all up in my head. It was just like, just let it happen and things flow.
Okay.
So.
No, yeah, definitely. That's great. All right, so that's Jose.
Yep.
Danny for you guys. I'm gonna tell you.
I have one more.
Yep, go for it.
One thing you should do is walk with people who are a lot better than you, because this guy was like our idol. This is who we had to catch up to. So it was always like inspiring to see someone who was just literally crushing every line, and it was like, all right, I want to get there. So big tip, find a group that there's crushers, or walk with people who are better than you that will push you. So,
well, I'm honored by that. Yeah, no, that's a really good tip. I think, you know, to have that like group of people that is definitely trying to push. I've been on both sides of the spectrum where I'm with people that are just like absolutely crushing. Like, you know, I was at that freestyle gathering with Justin and everybody, and those guys were going hard. You know, I was sore after a couple of days. Now I know this isn't big lines or anything, but just an example. And I've also been on the other side of that where, you know, everyone's taking naps on the side of the cliff and the lines are empty. And it's just like, yeah, there's a place and time for both of those things. But if you really want to push and progress, you should probably hang out with the guys that are pushing and progressing. It just makes sense that that energy is contagious.
absolutely.
But yeah,
The stoke.
the stoke
stoke
is high.
is real.
The stoke, if the stoke is high, then that'll help you progress too.
Yeah, be patient with yourself too. You know, it's a journey. I was telling Alonso, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And as cliche as that sounds,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
very true.
really true when it comes to walking big lines and getting comfortable. So
yeah, so that's their opinions, and I think they're really, really good opinions. I'm gonna tell you guys mine really quick. I've got a couple of random things. The first one, obviously, like this is probably the hardest one, but access, because like you guys said, nothing quite really feels like a big line, you know? You can't really get hump in the park. You can't get those really weird motions. So, you know, if you can get access to big lines, that would be great. And I understand that's easier said than done, but now with segmented webbings and all this crazy stuff that we can do, you know, if you can get a good group of people to each pitch in like a little bit for a 50-meter segment, it doesn't take too much to have a 300-meter rig among a couple of your friends. So I don't know what the excuses are out there exactly, but a 300-meter rig shouldn't be too hard. Heck, you don't even need that many people to rig it. We've pulled 300 meters across a cliff by ourselves before with one person on each anchor. Now, the other thing, I think long lining is actually one of the best things you can do for your endurance. I think it was you that said endurance, right? Mm-hmm. My shoulders are burning right now. I just got off a couple laps on this thing, but you know, it's a real thing when you're out on a big line. It's objectively going to take you a long time, especially if it's your first couple times crossing those things. It can take, I've seen people take over an hour on something big.
it took me an hour and a half to do the 1.35 my first time.
So, exactly, yeah. So
No water either.
No water. It's hard. You know, endurance is definitely, I think, a key factor. And I think long lining laps in the park, which is something that most slackliners should have access to, is a really, really good thing. And then speaking on the long lining and endurance aspect, being really good at exposure, because you can actually rest your shoulders. And even, you know, I sometimes stand in exposure and massage my shoulders out a little bit just to kind of hang out and relax. And then my final tip, and this really only applies to big lines, but never, ever, ever look at the anchor when you're walking a big line. For one, it's going to psych you out. It's going to be really, really far away, and it's going to seem impossible as you're looking at it. But two, and I think this is, you guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, I think that the wiggles you see near the anchor have nothing to do with what's going on under your feet. So if you see wiggles near the anchor, and you react to those wiggles that you're seeing, you're gonna be reacting to essentially nothing. And that was the first big mistake I made when I started my big line journey a long time ago. And it wasn't for months that somebody told me, oh yeah, don't look at the anchor. And when I stopped looking at the anchor, I started getting much longer strides on my big lines and eventually sent my first big line, which at this point, I don't even remember what my first big line send was anymore.
Sending so many.
If I'm being, it's been a while if I'm being honest, but that's what you guys have anything else?
Nope. Have fun, you know, enjoy the process.
Yeah,
So,
man, honestly, as I say in almost every video, enjoy the process. Like Jose just said, we're here to have fun. We're not doing this, you know, we're not doing this for work, or if you are, that's awesome. But, you know, we're doing this for pleasure. Don't let it stress you out. Go out there and just have as much fun with it as you can. And I think that's it. So those are our tips for walking big highlines. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget, hit all the buttons down below. Again, this is Danny. This is Jose. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. See you guys on the next video.
bye.
Peace.
All right, sweet.
Yeah.